would like to note down a car that's following me because the lady is filming me. She lifted her mobile phone to film me. She's specifically filming me. I'm driving at 120. She lifted her mobile phone to film. So I'm not sure if you can see her. I hope this can be enhanced. But she is filming my car. It's a blonde woman. I think she's a
Hello, I'm Dr. Catherine Horton. Today is the 11th of January 2019 and this is the first video I'm making in the new year. I have been silent for a very long time because I needed to just spend some time with family over Christmas, and then I had to visit some people, and I've been extremely busy, but also I have been extremely tortured, and what they did over the last told me, and or the only plan that can possibly exist, the criminal, the plan for 2019. And before I start, I also would like to make something very clear that I indicated in the beginning. You've all probably heard about Q and the Q posts, and very many people are following them. I don't even want to go into what Q does, if it's good or not. Q is definitely there, it's a phenomenon, and what counts is that at least it sets out and it motivates people to do the right thing. Now, the one thing I personally cannot possibly digest is Q's sentence, trust the plan. So when I come up with the plan for 2019, I would like to affirm that at least it sets out and it motivates people to do the right thing. Now, the one thing I personally cannot possibly digest is Q's sentence, trust the plan. So when I come up with the plan for 2019, I would like to firmly say that you shouldn't trust any plan. You should improve on it yourself. So with this in mind, I would like to now go forth doing this to us and other people, meaning the directed energy weapon assaults, the illegal implanting with non-consensual body implants, the remote control torture, the neurotech assaults, and the infection with pathogens, with nanotech, with Morgellons, and all this sort of stuff. Who in society is doing this? Then also, what is the extent of capture of that group? And finally, how to recapture that group. This is what I call the battlefield overview, and I would like to give you my answers about who in society is doing it and all the other questions. I would like to start with the top level command and control. What I'm going to present here is probably not going to be news to any of you. To some of you, it might still seem like just a conspiracy theory, even though conspiracy theory, you all probably know by now, was a term developed by the CIA, right, to humiliate and brush aside any critics of the JFK assassination, right? So even though what I'm presenting here might seem odd to you, I encourage you to read a bit more, because the more you read, the more you will realize that what I'm presenting here is, as far as I can make out, the reality. I haven't seen any evidence that contradicts what I'm presenting here. So with this in mind, the way I see the top-level command and control of our society, especially the part that does this to us, consists of several groups or people or institutions, and these are the following. Number one, it's the Vatican. Number two, it's the black nobility. And if you don't know who the black nobility are, I encourage you to read the book by Fritz Springmeier called The 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Now, the black nobility, how to describe them? They are family lineages that acquired stupendous amount of wealth, not least because of their close proximity to the Vatican. These are also families who, traditionally, historically, were successful because of an incredible amount of ruthlessness and by just simply killing all their competitors, and in the end ended up acquiring so much wealth and so much power that now, fast forwarding over several centuries, they dominate the world. Who they are in detail doesn't even matter. There are a bunch of families, famous family names. As you go down through the ranks, the family names change a bit. I really refer you to other people to go into the details, but as you will see in this presentation, their precise identities don't even matter. All you need to know is that they do exist, they are hugely powerful, and they're pretty much on top of our world, and they are pulling our strings. And not our strings, everybody's strings, in fact, without sometimes us noticing. Then also, of course, undeniable at the top level are the European royals. It has been rumored that the Queen of England, for example, is the biggest landowner on the planet. Then my personal point would be it has to be precisely distinguished what is owned by the Queen of England and what she's maybe holding, perhaps in a form of trust for the Crown Corporation and the Vatican. But that aside, it is absolutely undeniable that the European royals do wield a lot of power, are connected sometimes by direct family lines to the very top, and through that have to be counted as the top level command and control. Then, of course, the Jesuits. I would really want to put them on the map because they will be important later. What the Jesuits are will be explained in a moment, but in a nutshell, they are and have always been the Vatican's enforcement arm. They are a secret service. They are a network of, unsavory people enforcing the will of the black nobility and the Vatican. The Masons, on the other hand, here really represent the secret societies in general. They are the biggest secret society as far as I can make out on the planet, but they are also symbolic for example, the Knights of Malta, the Skull and Bones, and many other groups of people who are, secretive. I also would like to say that the Masons, as far as I can make out, are just a simple front by the Jesuits and the Vatican. They are nothing fundamentally new. They are not a different grouping. They are just the front that these very powerful individuals present to civil society and kind of use it as a recruitment arm. And then finally, of course, the so-called globalists have to be put on the map. These are what's endearingly called high net worth or ultra high net worth individuals. These are billionaires, trillionaires, probably also quadrillionaires, who control the biggest international corporations. So the capitalists, if you like. But what is very, very important is that we now have very detailed information about the control that they're wielding, and also how much these corporations in their own right are also contributing to the plight that we are suffering now as victims. Okay, so as far as I can make out, these are the top players. Okay, and you can also clearly see that there's a very strong European emphasis. You might ask, yeah, but what about the Chinese? The quick answer from me, and also the Russians, for example, the quick answer from me is that as far as I can make out, they are entirely in deep capture by this very same network. And the telltale sign is really the communist massacres in Russia and in China, because no power that is striving to become a world power would start massacring its own people, in the millions. When you do that, you are actually in deep capture by a foreign power, even though you might not see it, and even though your so-called leaders might look Chinese, but in actual fact, the puppet masters are elsewhere. So for these reasons, I would actually still like to focus on the Western world, not out of my own myopia or arrogance, but simply because as a systems analyst, I think these are still the main players at this moment in time. So these are the people who are relevant to us, and these are the people ultimately who created this genocide. Okay? Now, if you ask, how are these people involved in detail? I would say, roughly speaking, as follows. The Vatican, apart from, as I would say, being in charge of worldwide brainwash through religion, although that might be a, very hotly debated point by Christians, what you might, what you think or don't think about religion doesn't even matter, but what's an undeniable fact is that alongside religion and what I would call propaganda and brainwash, the Vatican is also the owner of the Vatican Bank. And this is, I think, still the most powerful financial structure underpinning our world to this day. Even though you might think the Vatican Bank is a small thing, its tentacles are not small, but reach into absolutely everything and even into the smallest communities. So this is why the Vatican has to be put on the map, because that's also where a lot of the money lies. Now, the other thing that has to be noted is that whistleblowers have been reporting sacrifice rituals in the Vatican. There are several survivors and several people who have come back and have reported that they have been flown to Rome, they have been taken to the Vatican, and they have witnessed and taken and were forced to take part in human sacrifice rituals happening in the catacombs under the Vatican. So under St. Peter's Basilica. Okay? So this invariably involved the murder of a small child, a baby, a toddler, and sometimes even a person. So for these reasons, there's something extremely highly criminal happening, and these human sacrifice rituals run like a trail through the entire upper echelons of this command and control structure. And also they are responsible for the human trafficking, the incredible brutality, the child abuse, and the pedophilia we see in our societies, especially at the highest levels of society. Now, the black nobility is, as I said, these ruling families. Some might call them the ruling mafia families. But through their influence, these people are involved in absolutely everything that all the other groups presented here are involved in. And I would also say that they are the ultimate command and control. So if we turn to the royals now, they are, I would say, the public royals that we can see, whereas the black nobility is more hidden. It's, they are also their own type of royal families, but they are not, parading in public. As far as the public royals are concerned, we already heard reports about the royal families expecting a great culling. There's, for example, the testimony by Dr. Rima Leibov about a conversation she had with the head of state, who, she later on describes as, or circumscribes rather, as being, European royalty sitting on a throne. And this was the person who said to her, "Oh, it's almost time for the great culling, isn't it?" Now, this video where Dr. Rima Leibov reports this conversation she had is on my website under the what's it called? The Death Camps and the Global Holocaust. You can find it on the front page, the link to this section, and there you will find a video where you can see her say that. Now, she wouldn't have said that in public if it weren't true, and there are other sources that pretty much allude to the same thing. In other words, the European royals are not just aware that there's a great culling, a great genocide in the making. Some of them are even looking forward to it. So, remember, these royal families are related among each other. And just like you might hear news from a distant uncle about, what's happening in the world, news also travel among the royals, obviously. So if there's any great culling that one royal knows about, all the other European royals most likely will know about it as well. Okay, so it's safe to assume that the royals are in on it, if maybe not actively taking part, then most certainly acquiescing, or at least, knowing about it and not alerting anybody to it and not doing anything against it. So we have to assume that they are involved. The other thing that points to it is also that there have been pedophilia scandals in the UK and in Belgium that are now widely published, which seem to indicate that the royals are also part of the same crime and satanic and human sacrifice networks that the black nobility and the Vatican are reported to be involved in. So going down to the Jesuits, it has to be emphasized that they are not just a worldwide intelligence network, they are the worldwide intelligence network. They are the superstructure above all the intelligence agencies we have in the world. In other words, places like CIA, MI6, and even the KGB are just front offices for the Jesuit network. And they are, how to put it, they are daughter organizations of the Jesuit networks. The Jesuits have already centuries ago been the biggest intelligence network in the world. You can't create a new intelligence organization like the CIA or MI6 out of thin air and not assume that you will be captured by these people within the first week, month, or year. So by the end of it, you will be subsumed and become actually a daughter organization of the biggest intelligence network. So by this process, it's pretty clear that they are still the worldwide intel network, but they also have a network of assassins that they are quite famous for. If you buy the book Vatican Assassins, these are the Jesuits, you will be, purchasing a massive tome, which probably must be just volume 1 in my private opinion. But you can see how the Jesuits have been responsible for covert murders around the world throughout the ages. Okay. Now, regarding the Masons, I am aware that the lower levels are oblivious about what they got themselves into. However, it is just a fact that the Masons are a worldwide network tasked with capturing men in every society where they establish their lodges. That's the entire point. You're trying to organize the men in a society, not into the flat hierarchy that they might be born into and that they might enter when they turn 18 and have the right to vote and have every other right that other men and women in that society have. What you're doing by making them join the Masons is you organize them into a bigger pyramid and you make them work climbing the ranks and therefore having to please their superiors within that architecture. Okay? So that is a way to capture all the men in a society. And once you have captured a significant amount of men, you can start subverting and ruling that society. Okay, this is why Masons and secret societies in general are extremely important when you're talking about capture. Now, the final set, the globalists, they have been mapped by ETH Zurich, so the university here in Zurich, and more specifically by the Systems Analysis Department. A group of systems analysts and mathematicians came out with a paper in the year 2011, and they termed this the network of global corporate control. And what they mapped was 43,000 international businesses, and they discovered that these 43,000 businesses were to almost half all part of one big syndicate, one interlocking organization that achieved control over these businesses, not through holding the majority in the shares, but rather through interlocking board memberships and controlling the board of directors. Now, this network of global corporate control has 40% of the companies, but 60% of the revenue. In other words, it has critical mass. Over half of the world revenue of these international companies goes to this syndicate, and you can bet your last penny that this syndicate is tied in with the black nobility and the Vatican Bank. So as far as I can make out, these groups are all one, they are all in it, they're all involved. There might be individuals in every category that are less informed and less involved than others, but it has to be said that overall these institutions are the ones doing it and coordinating it from the top level down. Now, going one level down, who might be the main perpetrators closer to us, closer within our governments and our own states? There I would certainly count the police, because it's now established that the victims of these directed energy weapon attacks and this global genocide have been reporting the assaults and the murders and the deaths and the mutilation for decades now, and the police has done absolutely nothing. So the police is absolutely involved. Of course, the intelligence agencies are involved, because you can't have so many police reports and so many victims complaining about these assaults on the internet, on YouTube, on Twitter, every day, every night, for absolutely years and years and years, without the intel agencies knowing about it. So if they know about it and they don't do anything about it, even though they are tasked with fighting terrorism, this means that they are involved. The other group of people, I just called it here the NSA. They are obviously involved, because they are the people monitoring the YouTube and the Twitter of the victims, and they are also the people who use the mass surveillance data, pass it to the gang stalkers, and it is through the NSA mass surveillance data that the gang stalkers on the street level can quote private conversations back to us that we had over the phone, over Skype, in emails and in chats. So of course the NSA is involved. Now I have taken the specific bother of separating Intel, the intel agencies, and the NSA for the simple reason that the Humantel, so the human intelligence section, and the SIGINT, so the signals intelligence section, are staffed by different type of people and different skill sets. So in my mind, even though they do the same kind of stuff and have certainly aligned goals, they are still separate. Now, the other category that has to be counted on the same level with Intel and the police is obviously the military. Okay, so we are talking about military weapons here. Of course, the military has to be involved as well. Now, what I've already mentioned is the contractors. I gave the example of Lockheed Martin that was uncovered by Karen Melton Stewart of running the gang stalking in 47 out of the 50 states. The other thing that we also have regarding contractors is, for example, the testimony of Catherine Austin Fitts, who said that when she was working in the US government, she was the Assistant Secretary for Housing under George Bush. When she was working in the government, she couldn't get access to the data that she needed because the contractors that were running all the computer systems and all the databases refused the information, refused to give her the information, even though she was in the government tasked with procuring that information and mapping what was actually going on in the country. So this implies that the contractors have, first of all, they are involved, they are barring elected officials from access to crucial data, and therefore they must have their hands also in these attacks, right? Because these attacks show up everywhere in the databases. Then, of course, there are the stalkers. They are most obviously involved because they are all around us, right? But also, let's not forget the banks, okay? Because there are huge sums of money sloshing around here in black budgets and so on and so on. And the banks know very well how this entire infrastructure fits together because they see the money flows day in, day out. And finally, I would also say that the biowarfare labs are involved because, you know, modern warfare compounds, pathogens, morgellons don't just by accident end up in people, right? These are very highly specific, human-made, very advanced, sometimes life forms even, right? But certainly nanotechnology, and they are all developed by specialized labs, okay? So as far as I can make out, these are the people who are involved, okay? I should also say that with the stalkers, I mean also the floating death squads wielding directed energy weapons and so on, right? But if we take these groups of people together, this is the minimum set that you need to pull off a genocide as we're seeing it right now. So these people must be involved, okay? So for this reason, I have labeled these organizations and these groups of people as the main perpetrators in our country, and it's also clear that they must be fully captured, or else it wouldn't happen what we're seeing now. So going through again, what evidence we actually have of their involvement, I would say the police gives their game away when they refuse to have any investigations. Intel and the NSA are, of course, tasked with the stalking and the surveillance. It's using their dragnet mass surveillance data. The stalking is using Intel hand signs, Intel methods, and the Intel surveillance, national surveillance networks, right? Regarding the military, they are most obviously involved because we're dealing with highly advanced military weapons that are only really accessible to the military and to military intelligence, right? The contractors are obviously involved because they are the ones maintaining the databases, the computer systems, the computer infrastructure, even all the way up until to the satellite systems and so on and so on. Then, of course, the stalkers, they are everywhere. We can see it with our own eyes. The banks control the money flow and they map the money flow day in, day out. They, of course, are involved. They haven't raised an alarm. And of course, the biowarfare labs must be involved because of the type of pathogens and synthetic things like Morgellons that we find in victims. So this is pretty established, right, that these people are involved. But who else in our society might be a problem? Maybe going further down, the ladder. And this is now the list of people who are certainly complicit. And they have to be complicit, and there's plenty of evidence that they are complicit, okay? But I would also say that these are the people who are only partially captured. So if you remember, the previous plot were the main perpetrators who are fully captured. Forget about them. At the very top, they are fully all in it, totally in the organized crime. Now, these are the people where you can't really say the same thing. Some of them are complicit, but they're only partially captured because we also have evidence that there are still good people who are fighting this, and you can't say that they are completely gone. So in this category, I would actually count the media, even though I am one of those people publicizing every incident of libel of the victims, of the Holocaust victims, right? But I would still say that by and large, large parts of the media still haven't really fully gotten their head around what's actually going on. Some had plenty of heads up, right? But others really haven't. And when I talk to journalists, I still find people who are utterly shocked and really, really terrified. And that's very clear in their faces. So that's the sign for people who haven't heard about it before. The other group of people who are partially complicit, but not all, are government officials. And there, for example, I have the personal testimony from a lawyer who said that government officials approached the legal chambers with complaints about surveillance, about directed energy weapon assaults, about all sorts of harassment and gaslighting at work. So I can tell that there are many government officials who are also new to these crimes and are being terrorized by them and are also terrified, just like the victims are. But nevertheless, the government officials do provide the data and do provide access, basically, to these perpetrators and do not speak up. So they are most certainly complicit. Now, finally, I would like to talk about the courts, right? The courts, of course, are complicit because I have seen myself corrupt judges with my own eyes. But then again, even in my own court case, I have seen honest judges as well who were shocked, who really thought that this has to be investigated and did everything to support me. So for these reasons, I still hold out and I still say that the courts are only partially captured, right? But of course, I'm aware that they are, tasked with and are engaged in blocking the cases of victims. The other people I would like to mention, very important, are neighbors, because they host the weapons, they do the spying, they do the gaslighting. This is the case what is happening in the case of every single victim that I know about. The neighbors are always involved, but again, there are also other neighbors who are also victims and have never ever heard about this and are equally terrified. Finally, well, actually not finally, second to last, researchers. Here I count all the university research departments into brain science, for example, but many other types of researchers in other fields that are, you might think are only tangentially connected. But again, while some researchers
Gather the
clearly
tips.
do use the victim data,
Come on.
clearly do try to
Commissioner.
access victims' brains
Dummy
remotely, and
researcher,
clearly do publish
93.47%.
research that is clearly based on abusive sort of methods,
researchers.
at the same time, there are many
Go.
researchers who have never heard about it. And I also know about researchers who themselves, I mean, me included, for starters, have fallen victim to all this criminality. So again, this is why I counter researchers, even though some are involved, undeniably, just like the courts, just like the media and the neighbors, I still hold out that the researchers are not quite as deeply complicit at the highest levels as are, for example, the intel agencies. Then finally, doctors, of course, they have to be mentioned because they are doing the implanting, and they are also doing some of the very advanced monitoring of victims. And there are many, many victims who report being pushed pretty much close to death and then being brought back again. Well, for that, you really need the detailed knowledge of doctors. And we do know that they are involved. We also have the names of some, and there are more to come. But again, doctors, there are also, for every doctor, there's also doctors who genuinely try to help. So, but nevertheless, this is what the battlefield looks like, okay?
We're gonna
and then
let you know.
the question is, if all these people are involved, how do we recapture these systems from them? Where do we start? And now I would like to go through every single one of them one by one and discuss if and how they could be recaptured from organized crime and utter insanity. Starting with the Vatican, I would say I consider them personally beyond redemption. By the time you're staging human sacrifice rituals in your own catacombs, under your main church, inside your main temple, you pretty much revealed that this is your main agenda. So I have absolutely no truck with these serial killers and pedophiles and child murderers. I think, we should put them aside and come back when we are ready to jail them. Pretty much the same with the black nobility. They are involved in absolutely all the horrific things. They would have the power to stop it. They do not. Instead, they're propagating it. So, there's not much we can do. Now, regarding the royals, I have one big caveat. Unlike the black nobility, the royals are very public, and they are bound to the country where they are ostensibly, the head of state. What this means in practice is that, the royals can't just go underground in the same way the black nobility can go underground. Unless they want to spend the end of their days in a military bunker being represented by their body doubles in every public appearance, the royals still do have to somehow try to recapture themselves from this insanity and come back into sanity and try to preserve their family and their health. And then also there are some countries who do have a tradition of executing their royals. And while I absolutely do not advocate that, it is a fact that if it comes to an uprising, the population is not beyond it.